Hi everyone, I am Dr. Anisha, and today I will be talking about a very important virus, that is rabies virus. And under rabies virus, I will be covering up the morphology, the structure of the rabies virus, its pathogenesis, then the important diagnostic bodies, that is the Negri bodies, and of course the post-exposure prophylaxis, which is one of the most favorite questions amongst the examiners. So now, moving towards the rabies virus, we must know that it is an RNA virus. It is an RNA virus, right? And it belongs to family Rhabdoviridae. Rhabdoviridae. And this rabies virus, it is responsible for 100% fatal infection, 100% fatal infection, which involves the CNS. And it is involving the CNS. And in this infection, the progression is very, very rapid. So it involves the CNS very rapidly. And then the associated organs, a number of organs are also involved and they're affected, and these act as a very, very fatal position in this particular infection. So there's going to be a rapid progression, and it is an acute infection of the CNS, and that is why we are saying there's going to be a rapid progression, acute infection of the CNS, right? So now, a lot of questions get asked from viruses, especially about the morphologies. So there's a lot of confusion lying around what are these single-stranded or double-stranded viruses, or whether they are DNA or RNA viruses. So a lot of morphological features are, asked, and these can be asked as one-liners. So in order to, make you memorize the morphological features of rabies virus, I have a very fun story behind it. So for the story, you must remember a girl named Sana. And throughout this topic, you should be remembering Sana. So Sana, she has a revolver. So she has a revolver and she has a motive to kill somebody, right? So she needs to kill somebody, and for that, she needs to have some sort of negative sentiments associated, right? So she has some negative sentiments, or we say negative sense. Negative sense. Remember, she has a revolver, and for killing, in order to make the revolver or gun functional, she needs to have bullets. So she has bullets, and she has kept these bullets safely secured in a case, right? So now let's understand the morphology. So firstly, Sana, so she has a revolver. It is an RNA virus, right? And she has to kill somebody. She has some negative sentiments or negative sense. So these are negative sense virus. She has bullets also. So the shape of the virus, it is bullet shaped, and she has kept these bullets safely secured in her case. So this is the case, and she has, for each bullet, it has a different kind of, packing or a socket, right? So these are kept secured. So these are safely secured. So these are single stranded viruses, right? RNA virus is negative sense, bullet-shaped, single-stranded, and because she has kept them in a case. So these are also enveloped. So these are enveloped viruses. I think now this story makes sense to remember the important morphological features for this RNA virus, right? Now moving towards the structure of this virus. Of course, it is bullet shaped, and you might get this shape of virus and you'll be given an image. So you'll be very easily able to make out bullet shaped virus is always going to be rabies virus. So can you appreciate this green part in this virus? It is nothing but the envelope. And it is made up of lipids. Lipid envelope. Right? And the structure, this yellow portion beneath this lipid envelope, it is nothing but the matrix or matrix protein. These knob-like structures are present all throughout the outer surface of the rabies virus, and these are nothing but the G-glycoproteins. G-glycoproteins. This spiral structure, it is nothing but the single-stranded RNA. Single-stranded RNA. And this black dot-like structure, it is nothing but the RNA polymerase. RNA polymerase, which will in fact help in further translation, right? And further leading to formation of proteins, amino acids, etc. Right? So this is the internal structure or the morphological depiction of the bullet-shaped virus. Right? Now moving towards the transmission firstly. So we know humans, majority of us know that rabies is transmitted to humans by bite of rabid animals. And what are these rabid animals? In 99% of cases, the infection is transmitted to humans by bite of a dog bite. So it is 99% of cases are of rabies caused by rabid dogs. Remember, it is not just a normal dog but rabid dog, right? And the other animals which can be infected, which can lead to the transmission, can be firstly cat, very rare. These are rare, sources of transmission of rabies. Cats, these can be raccoons, skunks, bats, etc. Bat aerosols are, mode of transmission. They act as a source of transmission, bats, but not in India. So their aerosol inhalation, not just bat bites, the inhalations of aerosols might lead to the transmission of this particular virus. So now transmission firstly can be a bite transmission, which we have already discussed, and these can be non-bite transmissions as well. Non-bite transmissions, right? And what does these include? Firstly, we have discussed there can be aerosol inhalation from the rabid animals. Then there can also be licks due to licks on abraded skin, right? So if there is some sort of abrasion, non-continuous skin, licks on that particular area by a rabid animal can also lead to transmission of this virus. And thirdly, for humans, this virus can also be transmitted by corneal transplants. Corneal transplants. Why just corneal transplants? We will see the pathogenesis and we'll better understand it later on. So there can be bite transmissions and non-bite transmissions as well, right? So now moving towards the pathogenesis. I told you already that we have to remember Sana for, understanding this rabies topic throughout. So Sana, because she has to kill somebody, because she has to drive her car. So in order to drive, she needs to drag the covers out of the car and then she'll go and kill the person, right? So the mnemonic for pathogenesis, it is Sana drags covers, right? So firstly, the dog has bitten. We will throughout consider dog as the rabid animal. So in order to make you understand. So firstly, virus is present at the site of inoculation. Site of inoculation. Right? So we've covered the first letter, Sana. It is present at the site of inoculation. Then it is going to replicate in the muscles. In the bitten area, the muscles present. So replication occurs in muscle. Then there is going to be, it reaches the peripheral nerves. This virus reaches nerves where it attaches to, ACH receptors, ACH nicotinic receptors at neuromuscular junction, right? And then occurs the neuronal spread. Neuronal spread occurs. And this is occurring via peripheral motor nerves, that is the axonal transport. Axonal transport is occurring, and that is in retrograde fashion. Retrograde manner, right? And what is the speed of this spread? It is 250 mm per day. So it is the rabies virus which is traveling. Now the axonal transport has occurred in a retrograde manner and it reaches the dorsal root ganglia. It reaches the dorsal root ganglia, and then what occurs is there is going to be, and this, remember this spread, this neuronal spread, it is centripetal. Centripetal. After reaching the dorsal root ganglia, it is going to reach the CNS, right? And in CNS, it is going to affect two things. One is cerebellum and the hippocampus, right? So Sana has dragged the cover, so dorsal root ganglia, and then it reaches the CNS where it affects the cerebellum as well as the hippocampus. Now, via CNS, there is going to be a centrifugal centrifugal transport to organs, to other organs. And what are these organs? So this virus can involve firstly salivary glands. It can involve the cornea. It can involve kidney. It can involve spleen. And it can involve pancreas. So most commonly, if it is involving the salivary glands, so rabies virus is going to be shed in the saliva of the person which has, acquired this infection, right? So it will be transmitted via salivary glands, and the saliva in itself acts as a, medium to transport this or to transmit this virus. And the cornea gets infected. If we have taken cornea from an infected patient, this also can act as a source of infection to the transplant recipients. Then the other organs, of course, we said about the other systems, renal system, that is the kidney, and the spleen, and of course the pancreas, etc. So this, I think, covers the pathogenesis. The mnemonic justifies the pathogenesis and the steps in which the spread is occurring. It is first, the rabies virus is first present at the site of inoculation. Then it replicates in the muscle, it reaches the peripheral nerves, and it attaches to nicotinic ACH receptors. Then neuronal spread occurs in a retrograde manner where axonal transport is occurring, right? And it reaches the dorsal root ganglia, and from dorsal root ganglia there is going to be involvement of the CNS, and further from CNS there is going to be a centrifugal transport to other organs and involving all these organs, and these also act as the source or the modes of or the exact sources of the virus transmission, right? So let us understand this with the help of this particular image. So firstly, dog has bitten the human being, right? So virus is inoculated at that particular site. Then the virus, it is replicating itself in the muscle of the human being, right? Then it enters the peripheral nervous system. The virus, it is entering the peripheral nervous system. Then there is going to be a passive ascent via the sensory fibers, leading to the viral replication in dorsal root ganglia, and from dorsal root ganglia it is definitely going to reach the CNS. There is going to be a ascent in the spinal cord, which will further lead to infection of the spinal cord, brainstem, cerebellum, and other structures, hippocampus. So it is the cerebellum and the hippocampus most commonly associated. Spinal cord and brainstem infections are not very commonly involved, but the most important sites are going to be cerebellum and the hippocampus. And finally, there will be descending. Firstly, there is going to be an ascending infection towards the CNS, right? Retrograde axonal transport. And then after reaching the CNS, there is going to be a descending spread of infection, that is to different organs involving the salivary glands, skin, eyes, etc. So firstly, there is going to be an ascending infection, and then there is going to be a descending infection, right? So this is how we understand the pathogenesis of the rabies virus with the help of this story. Now, once this rabies virus, this virus infects the cells or the body, what are the histopathological changes which can be seen and which will help us in the diagnosis of rabies virus? So firstly, there are going to be presence of Negri bodies. Negri bodies. Then there is going to be perivascular cuffing of lymphocytes. Then there is going to be infiltration of the mononuclear cells. And finally, there is going to be presence of these important bodies which are, inclusions, or we say these are nothing but the microglial cell nodules. So there are going to be presence of Negri bodies, perivascular cuffing of lymphocytes. There's going to be mononuclear cell infiltration and special nodules or microglial cell nodules, which are considered as or called as Babe's nodules. Which, examiners might use these words to confuse you in exams, and they might just ask the differences between these Babe's nodules and Negri bodies. So these are the histopathological changes you must remember that occur in rabies infection, right? So this is the image of perivascular cuffing of lymphocytes. There's going to be excessive deposition of lymphocytes around the vessels, just like the sleeves, shirt sleeves which are folded around the blazer, right? So these act as or we consider them as perivascular cuffing of lymphocytes, right? There's going to be accumulation of lymphocytes around the vessels, blood vessels. Accumulation of lymphocytes around the blood vessels. Now moving towards this term Negri bodies. So in order to know or know the morphological characteristic of Negri bodies, we first must know that these Negri bodies, we have a mnemonic derived from the name itself. So it is Negri. So these are, firstly, these are eosinophilic, you must know. Then these are intracytoplasmic. Intracytoplasmic. Eosinophilic. G we are going to ignore. Rabies. R stands for rabies, and it also stands for the composition of these bodies, which are made up of RNA and proteins. Then these are nothing but intracytoplasmic eosinophilic inclusion bodies. Inclusion bodies, right, which are affecting the hippocampus, and the cerebellum, right? So these are nothing but intracytoplasmic eosinophilic, and the granules you must know. G, if in case you do not remember, these are eosinophilic inclusion bodies, And the internal structure of these inclusion bodies is that you have blue granules or basophilic granules which are these RNA and proteins, right? So these are intracytoplasmic, eosinophilic inclusion bodies which have internal basophilic granules which are composed of the RNA as well as proteins. And what are the most common sites that these are affecting? These are affecting the hippocampus as well as the cerebellum. So in cerebellum, it is affecting the Purkinje cells, and in hippocampus, it is affecting the pyramidal cells. You must remember these as well. So these are all important one-liner questions, right? And especially these Negri bodies and its composition is very, very frequently asked. So what are these Negri bodies? First of all, so can you see these red eosinophilic structures? Rounded eosinophilic structures? These are the Negri bodies which are intracytoplasmic, right? These are intracytoplasmic. Of course, these are eosinophilic, right? And to know the internal basophilic structure, let's have a look at this particular image. So this, if we suppose this is the Negri body, and if we look closely, we have these small dot-like structures which are present inside the Negri body. So these are the basophilic granules composed of RNA and proteins. And now if we are able to appreciate, this is the cell and this is intracytoplasmic. So bodies are present inside the cell only, right? So these are the Negri bodies, and if we find these Negri bodies, it is going to be pathognomic of rabies. And also, if you are able to appreciate, let me just delete one or two of these bodies. So if you are able to appreciate, there is certain sort of halo around the cell. Suppose this is the cell. Can we appreciate some amount of halo around the cell, right? If you are able to appreciate the halo, small halo, very minute halo around the cell structure. So this is also a very important feature, these round bodies with surrounding halo. Right? So why are we detecting these Negri bodies? Of course, because it helps in firstly post-mortem detection of these inclusions. So we are going to take samples from, we require the CNS sample for it. So it is going to help us detect the post-mortem presence of the rabies Negri bodies, right? So how do we describe the size and shape of these bodies? So these are round, or mostly we say these are round or oval bodies, or maybe spherical bodies with 8 to 10, it is 8 to 10 micrometer in size, right? So these are round or spherical, 8 to 10 micrometer in size, and these are present intracytoplasmic. So post-mortem detection of Negri bodies, it is pathognomic for the presence of rabies. As we said, it is 100% fatal infection of the CNS, right? So, what are the stains that are used to detect these neighboring bodies? Firstly, we must remember that we can use metoxylin and eosin stain. Then we have Cellar stain. Cellar stain. For cellar stain, remember the mnemonic BBM. So it is basic fuchsin, basic fuchsin plus it is methylene blue in methanol. So this is the composition of cellar stain, and we have another stain that is Mann stain, which is of course going to help us diagnose those basophilic granules. Basophilic granules present inside those eosinophilic inclusions, right? So for immunohistochemistry, this is more specific and sensitive test, right? So what do we do in immunohistochemistry? We use peroxidase labeled specific antibodies to detect these inclusions. Right? So these are nothing but peroxidase labeled specific antibodies which are used to detect these inclusion bodies. So it is more specific and sensitive test done. Now we also spoke about different kind of nodules which might be seen or which might be some sort of immunohistochemistry or histopathological change which can be seen, which might be visible. So these are Babes nodules. Can you appreciate these small nodular structures present in both the images? These small nodular structures present, right? So these are nothing but the proliferated microglial cells which come together and they form nodules which are referred to as Babes nodules, right? So this can also be a feature seen in rabies histopathological change. Now we have discussed about the morphology, we have discussed about the pathogenesis and the organs associated along with the histopathological changes which take place. Now let's talk about the post-exposure prophylaxis of rabies. So firstly, we need to remember this, that the post-exposure prophylaxis needs to be started immediately after exposure. So what is the first thing that we do? Firstly, we have to provide the wound care, wound toilet, right? That has to be done immediately, and also specifically for dogs and cats, we have to look or we have to observe the cats and dogs for around 10 days to look for any signs of rabies, which the dog which has bitten, we have to observe the dog for around 10 days, right? So now for the approach for prophylaxis, it is a three-pronged approach. Three-pronged approach. Firstly, we have to do the wound care or wound toilet, or let's say wound care. Then we do the passive immunization with the help of rabies immunoglobulin, which we are going to administer, right? And active immunization is also done. Active immunization with the help of rabies vaccines. Right? So we need to do three things. Firstly, immediate wound care. Secondly, passive immunization as well as the active immunization. So let's talk about firstly the categories of exposure before moving on to the wound care and the approach. We must know different categories which are going to help us segregate whether whether any measures need to be taken while providing the vaccination, whether you need to administer immunoglobulins or you just need to administer the vaccine, right? So firstly, let us talk about the categories of exposures. So category 1 includes, firstly, if you're simply feeding the dog, if you have an intact skin and the dog licks on intact skin, or there is going to be any exposure to the saliva or secretions of the dog, or simply if you are petting the dog. Right? So there's no abrasion, there's intact skin, a dog licks you or you're feeding the dog, or any sort of exposure to the saliva or the secretions of the dog, that is going to be included in category 1, and we need not do any prophylaxis for such cases. No post-exposure prophylaxis is required for category 1 exposure. Now let's move on to category 2 exposure, where there are going to be firstly minor scratches. If there are minor scratches or abrasions without bleeding. So this category is one of the most ignored categories, mostly in Indian households, where our dogs, either whether they are vaccinated or not, it's not important, but the important point is that mostly people, they ignore these minor abrasions or scratches. So we must remember that category 2 patients or these minor scratches also must be taken very seriously, and post-exposure prophylaxis should be done for these. So there are these minor scratches or small abrasion, but there is no involvement of blood. And say if suppose mucous membrane, it gets involved, so and the dog is licking, that might come under category 2, but mostly it is considered under category 3. So in category 3, firstly, there are going to be bite marks. If solid bite, or there is lot of blood oozing out, so initially, and there is non-intact skin, and with non-intact skin there is exposure of the saliva of the rabid dog. So the dog licks non-intact skin. So initially it was kept under category 2, now it comes under this category 3. If there is licks happening, or the dog licks over non-intact skin. And finally, any exposure or any sort of abrasion or blood comes out above this area, eyes, ear, nose, anything, if even minor scratches or minor cuts are present, these are all considered as category 3, right? So category 3 is one of the most important categories, and it is considered to be an emergency situation if there is such kind of exposure that has occurred. See, lot of blood has been associated. We see blood oozing out of these scratches, so these are considered as category 3. So for category 3 wounds, we must remember that, rabies immunoglobulin needs to be administered very, very seriously, very important, rabies immunoglobulin. And for, larger, where deeper tissue is involved, if it is involved, and there are, strong bite marks, and there's lot of abrasion and lot of blood has been oozed out, we need to ensure that daily dressing is done. This is one of the most important precautions we need to take. So why we require daily dressing? Because we do not want secondary bacterial infections to take place, and that is why we are ensuring that we dress up the surface, the area, so that we do not get infected further. So when deeper tissues are also involved, lot of muscle is involved. So one important thing, although it is not recommended to suture the particular affected area because it further leads to the necrosis of the tissue, but if in case suturing needs to be done, first thing that we need to ensure that we are first going to clean up the wound. Then we are going to administer the rabies immunoglobulin in the wound itself. And then we are going to leave it for several hours for the immunoglobulin to, act on the particular tissue or area. Leave it for several hours and then finally suture it. And in such cases, you must also give some sort of antibiotics in order to prevent secondary bacterial infections. So suturing, although it is not recommended, if in case it needs to be done, then these are the steps that need to be followed in such cases. So let's move on to the elaborated approaches or wound management. So firstly, the approach for wound management. What are the steps that we can do? Firstly, physical washing needs to be done for the wound. Lot of you might have had such experiences where you must be knowing what all needs to be done for, cleaning up the wound. So physical washing is done. So we wash the wound under running water. What is it going to do? It is going to mechanically remove the virus. Then we are going to do the chemical wash. How are we going to do it? We are going to wash the wound with soap and water. And what is this soap and water going to do? This is going to inactivate the virus. And thirdly, we can also do biological step where what we are doing, we are administering the rabies immunoglobulin, and what is it going to do? It is going to neutralize the virus. It is going to neutralize the virus. So before the body it starts producing antibodies, this rabies immunoglobulin, it is going to neutralize the virus and further prevent the spread of infection, right? So what are the absolute no-nos for it? Firstly, we do not touch the affected site with bare hands. We do not know that we might also be having some minute abrasions, some microscopic abrasions which we do not know, and virus do not require a lot of, it doesn't require a lot of space to travel to the body, right? So micro abrasions, if present, they might lead to transmission of this rabies virus, right? So we must know that we should not be touching the this particular site with bare hands. Bare hands, first thing. And secondly, we should not apply any stuff like oils, some old practices, oils, or they used to put up chalk or any sort of turmeric. We are not supposed to put on any of such stuff at the affected site. It is further going to help penetrate the virus inside. So it's an absolute no-no, and this should be avoided at any cost. One more important thing that, now it is recommended, it is given in the guidelines that we must use tetanus prophylaxis also. Tetanus prophylaxis should be given along, right? And along with tetanus prophylaxis, you can also give a small course of antibiotics. And another important point, when we said we need to, inactivate the virus, we must use soap and water. We can also use povidone iodine along with alcohol as antiseptics to apply at that particular site. So it's not always done, it's not mandatory, but we can also put up these antiseptics at the affected site. Right? So these are 3 important points you must remember. Now, moving towards approach 2, that is rabies immunoglobulin administration, right? So we know that this is going to help us neutralize the virus. So what are the 2 different types of rabies immunoglobulins available? 2 types. These are human rabies immunoglobulin and we have equine rabies immunoglobulin. So these 2 immunoglobulins are available in the market right now. And what are the doses? You must remember, now that humans, we have 2 legs, right? So what is the dose? It is going to be 20 international unit per kg body weight. And horses, equine stand for horses, these have 4 legs, right? So what is the dose going to be? It is going to be 40 international unit per kg body weight. It is that simple to remember. So either of these 2 immunoglobulins can be administered, right? And how are we going to administer it? We are first going to bring the immunoglobulin to room temperature. Then how are we going to administer it? We are going to administer it completely intramuscularly around the site affected. So you're going to administer the rabies immunoglobulin at and around the site. So we are going to completely infiltrate this rabies immunoglobulin at and around the site in order to neutralize the virus, right? So infiltrate it, right? And this rabies immunoglobulin should never be given intravenously. And rabies immunoglobulin, it is of no value if it is administered after 7 days. So administer it within 7 days. So you're supposed to administer this rabies immunoglobulin within 7 days. Now moving towards approach 3, that is the vaccine administration, right? So what are these vaccines which are used nowadays? These are cell culture or modern cell culture vaccines, which is another name, or we call them as non-neuronal vaccines. Non-neuronal vaccines. Why? Because initially the vaccines that were used were neural tissue vaccines, which were derived from the brain cells or the brain tissue of the sheep or mice. So that led to a lot of neurological complications in the people receiving those vaccines. So these were replaced by these neural vaccines, so which are prepared in controlled manner in the laboratory. So these do not have any neural tissues associated. These are cell culture vaccines, right? So human cell derived vaccines are the most common vaccine cultures or cultivation which is used now. So this is also a question, that these are non-neural vaccines and no neurological complications are associated with these, right? So what are the two regimes? For these vaccines we have two regimes. One is updated thyroid cross, and the other one is SN regime. You must know that this updated thyroid cross, it is the intradermal, and SN, it is the intramuscular regime, right? So first, coming over to updated thyroid cross regime, you must remember this mnemonic, that to eat Thai food, we require 2 chopsticks, right? So 2 ko we will convert to do. 2 in Hindi stands for do, right? So firstly, with the D, we have derived that this is intradermal route, right? And we have 2 doses. 2 doses at each visit, right? And also, see, 2 people have gone out, 2 people on a date, and each one is using 2 chopsticks. So how many chopsticks total? 4 chopsticks, right? So they are enjoying their Thai food with 4 chopsticks. So this is going to be 2, 2, 2, 0 and 2 regime, right? So it is on day 0, day 3, day 7 and day 28, right? So this is a 2-dose regime. With every visit, you're going to get 2 injections, right? And this is going to be intradermal route, and total 4 chopsticks we are using. So 4 doses will be there. 4 visits to the clinic will be there. 4 visits, right? So intradermal route or updated thyroid cross regime, it is used nowadays. It is preferred nowadays mostly because it is cost effective firstly, and it is easier. We require lesser dose for it, right? So intradermal route, it is the preferred, and the thyroid cross, it is the preferred regime for administration. So how are we going to administer it? We will take zero point 0.1 ml of this vaccine, and this, remember, it is a reconstituted vaccine, and after reconstitution it has to be administered within 6 hours, right? So we take 0.1 ml of reconstituted vaccine and we administer it intradermally at 2 sites. And what are these 2 sites? We will be taking the deltoid muscle. So we'll take a few inches above the attachment of deltoid muscle, right? So it is a deltoid area at which we are going to administer this particular dose, and both the arms deltoid would be used for the administration at each site, at each visit. So this is the 4-dose intradermal regime, 4 chopsticks. So we are taking 0.1 ml of dose and 2 doses on day 0, 2 on day 3, 2 doses on day 7 and 2 doses on day 28, right? And 0.1 ml of dose for each arm for this intradermal regime, right? Firstly, initially we are going to do the wound cleaning and all, everything is going to be done. And then if it is category 2, involvement or exposure, we are just going to ensure that we give in the prophylaxis, that is rabies vaccine, and immunoglobulin needs not to be administered in such cases. So, and in case if category 3 wound is there, category 3, then firstly we are going to clean the wound. Then we are going to give the rabies immunoglobulin, and after rabies immunoglobulin administration, we are going to give the vaccine. You must remember these steps. So these are the things that we are going to do for administration of vaccine in category 3 cases, right? What about infants? In infants and young children, what are we going to do? We are not going to consider deltoid as the site of inoculation or the administration of the injection. We are going to take the anterolateral aspect of the thigh. This is the area which we are going to use for infants and young children, right? And for SN regime, so suppose there's a guy, he remains single, or we say a man, he remains single for 5 days a week. For 5 days a week, and then on Saturday and Sundays, he's definitely going to have some date. So remember this as a story associated with SN regime, that this is going to be an IM. There's going to be an IM route of administration. Then single dose is provided per visit. Single dose per visit, that is a single site would be used, right? And then he is single for 5 days a week. So it is a 5-day schedule or 5-dose schedule. So what is this schedule? 1, 1, 1, 1 and 1. So it is day 0, day 3, day 7, 21 and day 28, right? So 1 dose administered at each visit. This is day 0 and this is the time when you administer the first vaccine. It is the IM route and you're going to administer 1 full vial of vaccine at that particular site. And what is the most common site? So we administer 1 full vial intramuscularly, right? And what is again the site of administration? It is going to be deltoid area, right? And this deltoid area, this 1 vial is going to be administered for 5 different visits and only 1 site would be involved. So 5 doses, it is 5 doses and 5 visits. IM dose, it's not, it's not day 21 and 28. It is 7, 14 and 28. It's not 7, 21 and 28. It is 7, 14 and 28. Remember this. So it's a 5-dose, 5-visit schedule. IM route would be used. We firstly would do wound washing. Then rabies immunoglobulin, of course, it is administered in category 3 cases. And then we use 1 full vial at 1 site on days 0, 3, 7, 14 and 28. So it is 1 dose on 5 visits, right? So you must remember these things, that 5-day schedule requires the administration of the drug at 0, 3, 7, 14 and 28 days, while the Thai Red Cross regime, it requires the administration at 0, 3, 7 and 28. So 14th day is skipped and 2 doses are used. So the mnemonic or these stories will definitely help you understand or memorize these 2 schedules. So what happens if there's a re-exposure, a very controversial thing, or a question that gets asked multiple times. So what is the re-exposure? What occurs if there's going to be a re-exposure? Firstly, if it is re-exposure within 3 months, and there is documented, the vaccine card that is given, if there's documentation that vaccination has been provided within 3 months, then we only require to do wound care, wound washing with soap and water, and we do not require any immunoglobulin, any vaccines, right? So if the re-exposure has occurred, so what we do? Firstly, we do not require any immunoglobulin. No RIG is required. The only thing that we need to do is we need rabies vaccine, and that too 2 doses. 2 doses, right? If it is the intradermal route or if it is intramuscular route. only one dose of vaccine is given, and that too on day 3, day 0, and day 3. That's all that we need to do if there's any sort of re-exposure. We only need 2 doses, that is one dose for, when we were discussing about the this Thai Red Cross regime, it was 2 doses for 4 visits, right? So now if it is the Thai Red Cross regime also, we just require 1 dose, and that too for 2 visits, 0 and 3 days, and nothing else needs to be done for such cases, right? So we must also remember that we do not switch between intradermal as well as intermuscular routes. So it has to be avoided absolutely, but if it is under unfavorable conditions, or such situations where vaccine is not available, one sort of vaccine is not available, then only it is recommended to switch. Otherwise it is never recommended to switch between intradermal route and the intramuscular routes. So this was about the important parts, or important, very, very important topics from rabies virus and the prophylaxis associated, and the vaccines which need to be given, the schedules which are important, then what is the wound management, what needs to be done, and of course, the morphology of the virus and the pathogenesis, what are the different steps in which the virus is spreading across the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system, right? Thank you.